What is up, fellow sickos? I am Dan Favale, joined by, for the first time in 3 episodes, my certified fantabulous co-host, Mr. Grant Hughes, who has agreed to sit down with me for more than the 10 to 12 minutes with which he can only stand me for at this moment. So I'm very much appreciative. We're going to go through teams that we think are going to play better for the rest of this NBA season that have maybe struggled out the gate or not met expectations. Then we'll wrap that up. We have like 4 or 5 teams there. Then after that, we're going to ask questions on a handful of teams will these teams play better? Because they're possibilities, but we're not quite sure. But my first actual question is, and the one that everyone's dying to know the answer to, Mr. Hughes, how the heck are you?
Have I told you about Aloha Friday? Have I mentioned that to you?
No, why aren't you in a tank top? That sounds like a tank top.
So I'll tell you why. Well, by the way, we're recording this on a Friday. Every Friday, I'm a coffee drinker, not excessively, but on Fridays, or I guess I should say on Thursday nights, when I set the coffee maker, I use a different kind of coffee, and it's a vanilla macadamia nut coffee that I've only ever had before when I was in Hawaii, and it conjures like a lot of good sense memories, right? It's like it takes you there. It's a little different. It's a little treat every Friday. So we call it Aloha Friday around here, and that's what I've got in this cup right now. So I feel transported. And also the meter's running. You're 2 minutes into your 10, so get going.
Look, if that's not living, I don't know what is. Is it a psychological thing that you only make it one day a week, or is the coffee just so unbelievably expensive that it makes more sense to go just the one day a week?
It's not like fancy coffee at all. Like you just buy it on Amazon like anything else. It is psychological, and I've been doing it since July, and it really does work because like on Friday morning when I get up and it's just like, oh, I got to go talk to Dan for at least 10 minutes today, and I'm really just down about it. I think like, oh, when I walk downstairs though, I'm going to smell it and I'm going to get that Aloha Friday coffee. And it's a real, you got to do these little things. It takes, you'd be surprised the impact it can have.
I do the same thing since I cut down my own caffeine, even though no one probably believes me. With my energy drink, I have a favorite flavor, but now I don't really drink energy drinks as much. So it's like when I get to have that Sour Patch Red Berry energy drink that I allow myself, by the way, I was like having like maybe 2 to 4 of those a day at one point.
That's too much. That's too many.
Some people I'm still here. Some people are saying it's not enough, you might argue. But now when I have it like once or twice a week, it's just like and it's just you're still consuming other caffeine that you like, but because it's this one thing, I'm just enamored by it. However, also related to this, I did sign on today and I brought a lot of energy. I yelled your name and you either didn't hear me or didn't have it on. You just said nothing. And I was just like, wow, he really isn't. He's not about this today. So
I could come up with any number of excuses, like technically related, or I was too into my coffee cup, or I was like, well, do you really want to start the 10 minutes now, Dan? Is that you want to waste it on this? I say that after we talk for an hour and 10 minutes off air, which should just be paywalled. I don't think there was a basketball discussion had, but whatever.
I sometimes wonder if people would want to know that stuff because it's nothing that's ever controversial, but it's the subject matter might be a letdown.
Yeah, I doubt anybody would be interested, but at least let them pay money to find out they're not interested.
We should probably talk about basketball now, I guess would be a pretty good decision.
Right.
First up, the Denver Nuggets. Grant, now we're into the teams that we think are going to be better for the rest of the year. So why is this team going to be better?
Yeah, I mean, it's just, and I guess we should have said at the outset, these teams will be a very different strata of the league. Like there'll be some bad ones and some good ones and some in between. So we're just saying like it's going to be brighter days are ahead to whatever that means relative to the specific team. So for Denver, it's kind of just like, well, this is a buy low, right? Like they've won a title in recent memory. This is really where it starts. Is Nikola Jokic is the best player on planet Earth, and he's playing better in a lot of respects than he ever has. And guys like that, to the extent there are any, just generational all-timers, it's just kind of like he's just not going to let this team do this forever. And it's like, well, what else do you want him to do? Because we've all seen the on-off splits to where, this team is sub-wizards without him on the floor, and the offense is like beyond elite when he's out there. So he can't control what's happening when he isn't in the game. I don't know. I just have like this misguided belief that if he is who we know him to be, like the Nuggets can't just be like a hanging around 500 team for much longer. So a couple things, like Aaron Gordon missed time. He's back. Jamal Murray has shot 30% on wide open threes. And even if you think
Is
like
that
he's
low?
not, it's not great, especially without defenders in your general area. Even if you're convinced that like, you know, physically he doesn't look the same. There's also, I don't know if you've seen any of this, but maybe this is a week old now, but there's stuff circulating that he's sitting outside the huddle during timeouts and he just looks pissed off and, oh, this team's falling apart. I never know how much stock to put in that kind of like cherry picked, clips, but anyway. So if you're convinced that like, that's all, ominous, I still think he's going to make more than one out of fewer, he's making fewer than 1 out of 3 wide open threes. Like it's going to happen. He's going to get better. I don't think the on-off splits can stay quite this extreme. The half-court defense is actually like fine. It's just like some of the transition stuff isn't great, and they have all these young guys that are playing more. So if anybody can be like coached to get back once in a while, it's guys that have fresher, younger legs. So couple all that with the schedule actually has been pretty tough. It's one of the 10 toughest schedules in the league to this point. You have Denver's like well-known home court advantage. So you pick up a few wins from there that you might not otherwise assign to teams that we'll talk about going forward. But does that make sense? It's kind of, there's some numbers in it. There's some, Jokic is Jokic. There's just, this isn't where Denver's going to finish the season, I don't think. Now, if you get to a point where there is a real locker room fracture or Mike Malone's voice gets tuned out or something like that, then different conversation. But I just think you have so many factors pointing to this team isn't going to be kind of so ho-hum, so like uninspiring for, going forward the rest of the season.
Yeah, I think there's real concern here. When I was doing report card grades at the quarter season mark for Bleacher Report, I gave them, I think, a D or a D plus. Mm-hmm. And I think there's probably been the extremists who think that they need to make a trade. I can't get behind because one, I don't know what you're not getting better by trading Michael Porter Jr. It's not happening. And you're like, you're not trading Gordon. Like you can't trade Gordon or Murray. I guess you could trade Jokic. There might be a couple teams that.
You could trade Gordon, right? Of the.
Didn't he sign an extension? Isn't he ineligible to be traded?
Oh, you're right. No, you're right.
So my whole thing though is I don't think. And then you also look at some of the data. Do you know what their starting lineups net rating is, Grant?
Plus $1 million.
It's plus 16.6. So it's working. And the defense is like slipped a little bit. I think Aaron Gordon, he's missed time. By the way, other teams, I'm not assigning this to you. Other teams have had players miss games with injuries. And so I've seen a lot of Nuggets fans kind of like, well, Gordon missed that extensive stretch. It matters, but like, that's not the excuse. I do think he's been a little bit worse on defense this year, or at least noticeably worse. And that's hurt them. It does feel like objectively when you're watching them, I know the half-court defense is fine. This team feels more screenable. I don't know how much that has to do with maybe some of the effort that's being exerted on the offensive end for some of these guys. The defensive rebounding has been all over the place too. So I think there are real concerns, but you have Nikola Jokic. I think Jamal Murray's probably at the nadir of his on-court value, right? And so do you really think that he's going to get worse from here? No, it's probably going to look up at some point. And he's never been someone who I know now we're like 20 plus games of the season, so it's more concerning. He's always been inconsistent, even at his best. And it's like, he's never just come into the season like gangbusters, in part because he's usually coming off an injury.
Yeah.
So I think it's fair to be concerned, but you look at this team and as we're recording this, they're hovering around. I mean, you could just hover around play-in territory if you're the 3rd seed in the Western Conference at this point. But I think they are going to be one of the 6 best teams in the Western Conference when all is said and done. And I think Calvin Booth, whether this is coming down from ownership with Josh Kroenke, I think we are now witnessing kind of the fallout from years' worth of poor asset management with players you already had. And however, I still think this team is pretty damn good. Are they as good as they should be when you have a top 10 NBA player of all time in his prime? Probably not, but they're still going to be really good.
This is going to get us into a trend of making this a longer episode than we intended, but and there are no numbers for this, but do you think there's anything to the idea that like Jokic is so good and so obviously able to just make sure his team dominates when he's on the floor that it almost like, and again, the easier explanation is, well, Denver just doesn't have enough quality depth and that's why the on-off splits are so insane. But I wonder if just like it's almost like they're a victim of how good he is, to where when he's off the floor, it's just like nobody knows what to do, because it's like, well, like dad's not out here like telling us what to do and where to go, and like our safety blanket or whatever. It's just, it almost like has a negative effect on the Nuggets who play that when they're in the game without him.
So, yeah, I think you're right, but I also think that speaks to the roster that they've assembled, to where who do you look at on this team and say, well, they can be really good independent of Jokic? And so it's not like that Jokic has messed up the way that these guys can be maximized. It's that they've only surrounded him predominantly with guys who are maximized by him. And I think that the issue that we're coming to bear, but the way you phrased it is perfect. It's just, we're unsupervised dads.
Right.
I mean, the other thing you could talk about too is, I understand he's your most important player, and I would never invest real equity in a backup center. But like, you've now kind of made a few decisions where, like, DeAndre Jordan is 87 years old and gets more minutes than Zeke Naji. You've never taken I guess people could say the Dario Saric signing was supposed to be a sign that they were taking it more seriously. That was never a sign that they were taking the backup 5 minutes more seriously. So I mean, that's been a disaster. So I agree with what you're saying. It's just, I will ask you, you don't think this could be a matter of, because the way he plays, like, his true usage is through the roof when you're factoring in playmaking, but you wouldn't consider him, at least not by choice, heliocentric.
No, right? He doesn't want to be. It's almost like you have to force him to do it, and he's still great. Like, big surprise, he's the best at it. Like, when he has to do a thing he doesn't want to do. I think your explanation is probably right, is that really what's happening is everybody just looks incredible when he's out there. And like Jamal Murray, to answer your first question, is like supposed to be the guy that it is like, I can prop up second units. And the thing that's probably closer to reality than some theory that Jokic is so good he makes everyone bad is that like the other guys just actually aren't that good. Like, they're all, we rate everybody in his supporting cast a little higher than we should in terms of like, the Gordons and MPJs and Murrays, because they're only good when he's out there. Like that's kind of the thing. The other thing, it looks like you want to say something.
No, the only thing I was going to add to that too is some of these players, let's look at Christian Brown, done some more ball handling this year. Michael Porter Jr., definitely more self-sufficient on the offensive end, I would say. That stuff still just doesn't scale to like the minutes without Jokic, at least in terms. I actually think Denver's come close to playing net even basketball when Porter and Brown are on the court without Jokic. I think their net ratings like minus 0.5 or somewhere around there. But if I remember correctly, and I'm just going to assume I do because I looked at it recently, the offense during the stretches in the 4th percentile. So like a lot of that is like the defensive returns. It's just interesting. I don't think that has anything to do with Jokic, but it's even when you think, like, even when Jamal Murray at his peak has hit some of the biggest shots in postseason history. And even those players at their peak, when you think they might be doing more on their own, and Brown and I think Porter Jr. are good examples, it doesn't scale the same way to the minutes that Nikola Jokic is off the floor.
Can I make one more Denver point before we move on? We've probably already gone long. If I hear one more, how many games do the Nuggets need to win for Jokic to win MVP? Or like, how low can they finish and still would you, where do you disqualify him? What if they are a play-in team? Can Jokic win MVP? Yeah, he can. He should. And I hope he does. Look at what he did. So if the Nuggets are a play-in team, and they continue to play like the best team in the league when Jokic is on the floor, you're penalizing him in the MVP race for something that is by definition out of his control. If he isn't in the game, and those minutes are the reason Denver finishes 8th, 10th, 6th, whatever, I can't listen to that, because like, okay, if SGA is right there, like in terms of impact, and you've got to break the tie somehow, and the Thunder win 65 games and the Nuggets win 45, I get it. But if Jokic continues to so clearly be the biggest driver of success when he's in the game, you have to give him MVP. I don't care if the Nuggets win 30 games. If he's the best player, now, then come up with a different award if you're deciding that MVP depends upon what happens when the guy isn't in the game. If you need to have valuable mean team success, then give that to whoever is on the best team in the league. Give best player, best team, whatever. Come up with a different award that says who the best individual basketball player on planet Earth is for that season, because that's going to be Jokic, whether the Nuggets win 30 games or 60. And until the on-off splits change, and look, forget the split. That's an imprecise term. if Denver continues to be incredible when he's on the floor and it's because of him, he's MVP. I don't care what happens. I don't care about the 4th percentile offense when he's off the floor. He's not in charge of that. Does that make sense? Like, I feel like that's just an insane thing. We're discussing this all the time. All the talking heads can't shut up about how many games they have to win. I don't care.
Well, so how many games do you think they have to win? So look,
51.
Here's my issue with your argument is that when you kind of look at other all-time greats, Michael Jordan would have had his soul separate itself from his body and nudge the players during his minutes to play better. And the fact that Jokic hasn't pushed that type of button yet to where his spirit can still be on the court when he's not there, it just makes me wonder if you can build a title team around him as your best player anymore. I just feel like
I was ready to jump down your throat until I realized, okay, great. He's not serious.
Look, I get what I agree with everything you're saying. I do actually wonder though, because voters do tend to think differently. And I do wonder if we've evolved past that, because we saw, like, in my head, I have it as it becomes a discussion for how the voting is going to turn out. Yes. But there is the debate. Nobody can catch him at this point. Like, in the voting, maybe they can because of context. But as of right now, I'm trying to think, and it probably hasn't been since LeBron was the best player in the NBA. I really don't think I can remember a time where there's been a larger gap between the best player in the world and number 2. I don't care whether you think it's Shea. I don't care whether you think it's Giannis. I don't care whether you think it's Luka. Like, the Luka thing is the one that I think we might receive the most pushback for. In any given season, do I think Luka could be better than Nikola Jokic? Sure, it's up for debate. But how often are we talking about Luka's effort that night just wasn't there, or he hurt his team on defense, or he was complaining too much? Like, a gap exists. Luka can absolutely win MVP, like, at some point. And sure. I think that he's one of the 5 best players in basketball. But as of right now, I think there's a real chasm between Nikola Jokic and the field. And when's the last time that happened?
And that's not to take it's not to take anything away from, I think SGA is really the guy that is just like, I don't know, pick a random year in the last 25 and like, well, you're dealing with LeBron and Steph and Kate, but he's an MVP caliber player, as is Luka, as is like even Tatum, but they throw Giannis, whatever. Giannis has won it. Like
Franz Wagner before Zabli.
Franz Wagner was right there. So this will go down as the year Franz Wagner was robbed of MVP. But Jokic is just at a level that's higher, right? Like that's what we're saying. And I think you make the right distinction. The discussion about how many games do the Nuggets need to win or whatever for Jokic to win MVP, you can have that discussion if you're talking about will he. You can't have it if you're talking about should he. Right? Like, because if you're saying, will he win it? You're trying to predict what voters are going to fixate on, and who the fuck knows what they're going to care about, or how little they're going to actually critically think about what Jokic is doing and how like divisible it is from what the rest of his team is doing. So will he win it? Okay, fine. Have the conversation about where they need to finish, because that's just pricing in stupid analysis of what MVP is. But should he, that discussion's over. Unless he goes down tomorrow and doesn't play the rest of the year, then you can make the case he should not, because he's played 25 games or whatever it is. But you can't have how many games do they need to win if you're talking about should he win MVP or does he deserve it? That's a good distinction to make.
And I hate doing it this way, but if you're trying to argue that even the way we're framing it would be inaccurate, wouldn't it be if you put, which player do I want to, if I'm not even going to pick a player because I don't want to make them mad, but if you put Nikola Jokic on any of the players we just mentioned's teams instead of them, and then you flipped it, which team is going to be better? It is the team with Nikola Jokic every single time, because you want to know why? All of the players we just mentioned have better supporting casts.
Right.
Like, maybe, I guess you could make the case that Giannis is all over the place right now, but Nikola Jokic on the Bucks are better than they are right now. So that's not up for debate to me. We have other teams to talk about, though, Grant.
We're not going to get to some of them at this rate. That's all right.
Next up, look at that, Giannis and the Bucks. Tell me why the Bucks, or actually, can you also tell me why Bucks fans were mad that I gave them a C- as their report card for the season? I'm genuinely wondering. I didn't read enough of it because no one gets into reasons. They just tell you you're wrong. I thought I was being pretty generous. They've turned things around since they dropped to 2-8. But why are they going to be better, and why do their fans hate me?
I mean, the second question is because you said a not nice thing. Are you giving them a slightly below average grade after they were one of the most disappointing teams to start the season? I mean, so they were on a little bit of a heater before Chris Middleton came back, and in his first 3 games, even though they lost against Boston, he had a positive plus minus, and then plus 16 the next game, plus 4 the next game, without him shooting it all that well. So I'm starting to wonder if just like, is Chris Middleton just the key to all of this? And I mean, maybe the answer is yes, which makes the follow-up question like, how do you make sure he's around? Like, how do you make sure he can be on the floor? Because that's been the issue. I don't know. This is just another buy low, right? Like, even though the last 3 weeks they've been like very good. I think like it's still a flawed team. They're still old. They still are generally getting out athleted, like at most positions. They don't get back enough. Like Brook Lopez seems somewhat diminished. There's all that stuff, but like, I don't know, for every one of those, you've got Giannis, you've got Dame. That's like, it's just, they're not what are they, 12-10 as we're recording this, or 13-11. This is just a team that I think at least offensively is going to be like a complete like load to handle. Defensively, some of the athleticism stuff and transition defense is iffy, but it's a little bit like the Denver case minus like, I don't know, I guess like for Denver, it's like Jamal Murray should be better. Maybe for the Bucks, the corollary is Middleton will just be out there more now, and that just raises them a level.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. And they have, so since they fell to, it was 2-8, right? That's what they dropped to at one point. The Bucks are 7th in points scored per possession and 15th in points allowed per possession, which I think dovetails with what you're saying, that the offense was just, it was always going to figure itself out. And they've gotten Bobby Portis Jr.'s hit more shots. Gary Trent Jr. has been better in his new role. So that's going to help. And Chris Middleton, I know he's injured a lot, but like, people do forget that he's just like some sort of, he's a playoff killer. Like that dude in the playoffs is so, like, during the regular season, yeah, he's valuable. And I think it was John Schumann of NBA.com pointed this out. No one knows how to get Giannis the ball on this team better than Chris Middleton. And so there's something to that effect where it's, okay, the offense is, I think without Chris Middleton, they could have a top 10 offense, like top 7 offense, whatever. But like, you add Chris Middleton and then the Giannis dynamic into the fold, and like now you can reach levels to where you look like the second or third best offense in the league for longer stretches. Mm-hmm. I just wonder what's going to happen with the defense. I think Brook Lopez still is a rim protector. Totally awesome, mostly. After that, there's been some slippage from Giannis defensively. I did write that. Maybe that's what Bucks fans are pushing back against. I don't know how much of that. I do feel like you could have said the same thing last year, but this year specifically, his workload was harder as a self-creator when Chris Middleton's out. He comes back. That should make his life easier on offense. I have a lot of faith in this team still, and part of that might just be, okay, look, the Eastern Conference is, if you're, 12th, that just means that you're like 3 games out of first place. Or I shouldn't say that because the Cavs and Celtics exist. You're 3 games out of third place or whatever. I just wonder if they can get to a point to where we look at the defense and say, that's a decidedly above average defensive team for a majority of the game. That's where I have the question. And I think I feel like they are going to end up continuing. Did you watch the NBA Cup game against the Magic, who had neither Franz nor Paolo? Mm-hmm. They just made it way harder than it needed to be.
They excel at that. Like that really is.
I really do think that's going to continue, because I think there's going to be a lot of, even if it's not transition, guys are getting back, but they still kind of, opponents are looking to they still get out in transition a bunch against Milwaukee. There's going to be ball containment stuff, especially in certain lineups. Like this team is, I'm not going to say, I think I declared them one of the 3 best teams in the East leading into the season. I would walk that back off, but I think they're absolutely going to finish with a top 5 record in the East.
Oh yeah, I feel good about that. I mean, yeah, I just think like since we're trying to be measured about this, like I worry about Lillard as someone that has to be on the floor all the time. We're talking playoffs now, not whether it'll get better, but like, isn't just having him out there as like something to pick at just going to be an issue? Just, there's no fixing that. You can hide him, I guess, but teams are so sophisticated now. He's going to get called up and force the Bucks to do a bunch of pre-switching or whatever. Like that's just like a sore spot that's going to be there. So you're just gonna have to work around that. That falls on Lopez. That falls on Giannis being better as like a swoop in and block shots from the help side type of thing. But like, that's not, I don't think that's going away. And I imagine Middleton's probably going to get, challenged a fair amount until he proves that he's like fit enough to really be a stopper.
I think so they're in this weird situation where teams probably want to get out and transition against them because they're just not overall athletic. But then if you get into the half court you just have multiple spots to pick at.
Yeah.
And so if you are teams that are going to be good at capitalizing on mismatches or just going after weak points, that could really wind up hurting them. I do wonder though, and this is, this podcast is coming out after the official start of trade season, officially unofficial or unofficially official start of trade season. Like, do you view this as a team that can still be good enough to where it's everything everyone was talking about, not everyone, but was saying, well, Giannis requested trade and they have to worry about him asking for out eventually. I still view this team as that discourse has subsided, but I think when you're scaling ahead, there could maybe be hesitance from the Bucks perspective to really go after it this year, especially when you're looking at Middleton has a player option. Brook Lopez is going to be a free agent, but I view them as a team as you have that Bobby Portis salary. You even have the Pat Connaughton salary. You can't aggregate as of right now, unless you're shedding a ton of salary to dip beneath the second apron. Like, their 2031 first round pick should just absolutely be on the table for me. And who's the best wing defender that you could get for that? I don't know the answer. I want to make that clear. And we're also talking about Bobby Portis makes, what does he make? Like 12 million, 13 million. So you're tied to that salary range, but this is a team that I think I do mean it as a compliment, even if it's not coming off that way. I still think they're good enough that scenario needs to be on the table.
Oh yeah. I think much more. Yeah. I got real worried about the Giannis stuff when things were very bleak for this team, but I think now, you're more thinking about, and maybe this always should have been sort of the framing of it. Like, you still need to just, we have Giannis, we spent all this for Dame. We're a little bit pot committed. Like, that pick needs to be available.
Yeah, I just don't. I'm trying to think as of right now, scrambling in my brain of who would be the best player they could get for that pick. Plus, I would just use. I mean, then you get into the situation of, okay, well, now you're trading your primary backup big, but I'm just thinking perimeter defense at this point. And Bobby Portis he's at 12.5 million, and I just don't know I'm like trying. There's players that would fix it, but in terms of them being available, and you're also not even in the Dorian Finney-Smith sweepstakes because of the way that the salary accumulation works. So
that's so funny that was the name I was going to come up with, but I was like, I'm not sure. I should know how much Finney-Smith makes since he's going to be in every trade discussion. But
I even thought what would be interesting, just kind of, I know he's smaller, but you could just load up on like size that could theoretically space the floor, is Isaiah Stewart for this team, but too much money at 15 million. So, but even if you like, could we just go get them? I've been campaigning for Ayo Dosunmu. There's got to be, I'm not giving my 2031 pick for him, but you got Pat Connaughton, go get Ayo Dosunmu, and there's some ball containment right there.
Yeah.
Our next team is going to be the Minnesota Timberwolves. Mr. Hughes, why are they going to be better?
Because public call-outs when done with a smile work. Anthony Edwards.
Can I interrupt?
Yes.
Did we already have this discussion, or did you watch, like, when sometimes you read comments, and it feels like they're taken out of context, but even when you read the full quote, like Ant was asked this, he said this, it comes off so much differently when you watch the video of him, because you said it it was like murder with a smile.
Yep. And it was just like, I don't know. Sometimes you'd say to like let someone off the hook for comments like that. It's always coming from a good place. Like, it clearly was coming from a good place. Like, it wasn't even like, it was, benign's the wrong word. It was like as good natured a call out as there's ever been, because he was literally smiling like almost the whole time he was saying what he said about, oh, we can't talk to each other, we got a bunch of kids, like all that stuff. Somehow, I mean, that the discrepancy between how that read and what came across watching him say it is like as big as there's ever been in a money quote like that that's kind of been in the news cycle. So
if there was an award for like the MVP of disemboweling your team, he would get it, because did you see how he made a joke about Julius Randle not playing defense? He was basically like, it was nice to see Julius play defense for a change, and Julius was right next to him and laughed. And I'm like, there's more than an undercurrent of truth to that. And just like, he knows how to probably because of what he's saying behind the scenes. And he does, as a basketball leader, seems to very much uplift the way he used to interact with Kat specifically. Like, I thought that was fantastic. So there needs to be some sort of I know there's probably like a teammate award, but we need something else of just like, who can say the shit that's a tough truth, but like, it's not going to come off like that.
I mean, his demeanor just makes the medicine go down smooth. Like, because he says what needs to be said, but does it? I don't know. There's just like an inherent quality that he has because it's
He's
sincere.
the spoonful of sugar Mary Poppins was singing about. Is that what this is?
That's what Ant is. He's the spoonful of sugar. Like, it just makes it's easy to digest. And it's like, one, he's not wrong. Like, when that kind of all that criticism and the Randall point, that he's making factual statements. But I think you only get away with that if, one, like you said, he's saying all the same stuff, off camera or like off mic, and probably more, right? Like, and just he must be, and this isn't like a shock because this is like his whole image, like just so likable. Like guys cannot absorb that kind of criticism if it's coming from a source they're like, I don't need to listen to this guy, I don't like him, or if he's not leading by example too. Like, anyway, this will probably blow up in our faces. It'll come out that Anthony Edwards is like a terrible leader and an awful person or whatever. But it sure seems like,
I mean, he's done some questionable things independent of basketball. So
sure, absolutely. Right. But in this particular isolated, what we're talking about, let's confine it to that. It seems like this guy might just be a phenomenal leader. Like, at least early indications are that he's got some qualities independent of like playing the sport that are really hard to find.
And I can't believe this is not why we're here to talk about this. So I don't know why it's turning into this. He also, and shout out to the Dane Moore NBA show that I think asked him this question. And I was listening to the podcast. They posted the audio clip. A lot of national media, like, they always ask if there are Wolves games about the uptick in 3-pointers. But I guess Dane phrased the question differently. Well, I think they were facing Golden State. And the answer Anthony Edwards gave was just like, I'm summarizing here. He's like, yeah, I still want to get to the fucking basket. Like, that's my bread and butter. Yeah. But I'm taking these threes because that's going to open up the floor for us. And also just, it makes him more of a threat off ball. And he said, that's going to make it easier for me to get to the basket at some point. And do you remember when the narrative was, does he like basketball enough? Does he get it? And it's when it comes to basketball specifically, this dude, and like leadership with it. That's why I'm using like everything about the game and being the best player on a team. Yeah, there's been some not weird, but crunch time moments where the decision-making has not been great from them. He can look overtaxed in some of those playmaking spots. He does just get it.
Yeah, I agree. So
we can move on.
Ant aside, I mean, that's a lot of it. It's easy. It's kind of like the Jokic thing. It's just easy to have faith that a team that has him is going to sort it out. And really they have, like, because since that, and I think things were trending a little this way. So it's just nice to have that dividing line of like pre-call out and post-call out, but they've been the best defense in the league again since then. And they were at the time they were 8-10. They were 12th on defense, which normally that's not a huge problem, but offensively they're still working the kinks out. So, but like, I think defensively going forward now, the Wolves are just going to be like, they're going to finish in the top 5, right? You've got like OKC and Houston and Orlando that are just going to be great, but like, I don't see a reason that Minnesota can't be an elite defense again. They're not going to run away with it because I think that's going to be the Thunder's thing this season, but they'll be good enough to where you don't need a top 10 offense necessarily. Ideally, you want that if you're going to contend, but like, you can get away with a mid-pack offense if you're going to guard like that. The other side of it is, I think there's reason to believe the offense can improve too. And it might be uncomfortable, but like, the comfortable part is I think Mike Conley clearly matters a ton, even if individually his numbers aren't great, because I forget what the stats are. Okay, so here, this is a little bit old, but like the 4 games he missed initially, all of which the Wolves lost, they averaged 105. They scored 105 points, not rating, just put up 105 or fewer in 3 of them. When he's been on the floor this season, the Wolves score at a top 10 clip. So like, good enough. Conley's out there, we're okay. Now, somewhat similar to the Middleton situation, like, how do you make sure a guy with his mileage and stuff is going to stay out there? Whatever. The other thing is, I think that I know I've been banging this drum for a long time, and maybe it feels like out of touch or that I'm too stuck to this, but I think you just move Randall to the bench, and I think you move DiVincenzo into the first unit, and DiVincenzo gets to go back to doing what he did with the Knicks, which is run around and shoot threes and not be saddled with playmaking duties. You open up the floor that way. You put Randall on the second unit where you have Na, and you're going to have Naz Reid. So those 3 are, you're going to get some offense out of those guys, and the ball stopping matters less. There's a couple guys this year. Benedict Matherin's one. We may talk about him, and Randall's another, where I regret vacillating on like what I had as pretty set opinions on them, like being sold like, oh, he's moving it quicker. Like there was those stats with the Knicks maybe last year or the year before where his touch time is down. He's making.
Oh yeah, I was spoon feeding you those bad boys.
Well, but like if the numbers say that, it's like it's easy to be swayed. I regret being swayed. Julius Randle stops the ball. It's really hard to have a smooth flowing offense with him in the game. That's not to say it's hard to have an effective offense. Like we've seen proof that it can work in certain situations. I just think if the Wolves want to be the best offensive version of themselves, he has to come off the bench, and you have to put another shooter in the first unit, because then maybe Ant does get downhill more, and then maybe the floor is spaced more and pick and rolls work better, and Rudy Gobert actually becomes useful offensively. Like there's that to me. Tell me is that too simple of a fix? Set aside the ego of it or whatever, just like from a tactical perspective, why isn't Julius Randle coming off the bench?
I wonder if they're trying to insulate him defensively as much as possible, because he's been, I think even by Julius Randle standards, not really that great this year. And I think a lot of people were harping on the Wolves' demeanor in transition for a while, or maybe lack thereof. And there were some rough spots there, but as this takes the entire season into account, they are first in points allowed per possession after they miss a shot on the offensive end. And when you break it down to 2s and 3s, their defensive rating is second after they miss a 2, and it's second after they miss a 3. And so like this team has the talent, but if you go, then you go and you dig into it, and it's, teams just get out and transition all the time when Julius Randle is on the court.
So how is that an argument for letting him continue to start?
Well, I'm just saying, how do you insulate him coming off the bench defensively? Is your idea just, well, then he's going to face inferior offenses, so it won't matter?
Yes, and you'll be in a better position during those bench minutes, because I think the starters will just be better and the lead will be bigger. Like I don't understand. Like I don't know.
So that's actually an interesting point. I guess my whole thing is Mike Conley is so weirdly important to this team, and at his age, I guess, do you view that as something that then does it increase or decrease their dependence on Mike Conley as someone to have the ball in his hands? And because if you're bringing him off the bench, they've actually just, the minutes that Conley's played without Edwards this year, I think the Wolves were like a +9 per 100. They may get it done. So bringing Julius Randle off the bench doesn't necessarily, I guess, could it optimize minutes without Anthony Edwards?
My underlying theory is just, I think Randle has a negative effect in a lot of ways on the players that really matter, which is Edwards, obviously, the spacing component of it. And honestly, DiVincenzo, because DiVincenzo, I think, even though we love he's awesome. As a second unit guy, I feel like is having to make plays. And it's like, that's not what he is. I don't think, or at least that's not what he's best at. So if you put DiVincenzo in a role that really makes sense, where you are running, you're just gunning, like catch and shoot as much as you want, fly around, shoot, 15 threes per 100 possessions. That makes so much more sense to me in the first unit than Randle, who just you want playmaking, but I don't want playmaking that has to come from a dead stop. Like that doesn't help anybody.
Yeah, that's a good point. I guess where I'm at is I just increasingly don't love the idea of Julius Randle on this team. And so I
don't either. I'm trying to get him, I'm minimizing him right now.
Right, but that's so I'm just seeing that there's kind of no good answer. I'm just wondering, so you think moving him to the bench is like the better of two evils?
I mean, well, so your work, we've moved Randle to the bench. So I think he would hate it. I think that would be a problem.
Guess what? I don't care. You're getting paid.
I don't care. But the Wolves, and also the counter to that is the Wolves traded for him, I think, because of the financial side. I think that's clearer and clearer all the time. And so this isn't someone that you need to appease, I think, is what I would say. Like, because he's a short timer. I don't think he's a guy they look at as like, we really need to figure out how to make him part of the machine here. I think it's more like, how do we keep him from making the gears grind?
I guess what I'm worried about is if he's in the starting lineup, yes, he's kind of inhibiting the best version of that. And now if you get to closing lineup situations, it should be easier to say Julius Randle doesn't need to be on the floor, especially if Mike Conley's there.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen Chris Finch experiment a little bit down the stretch. But now if you dig into a lot of their lineups without Anthony Edwards, which I assume that's a lot of the minutes that Julius Randle is going to be playing, that if he's coming off the bench, none of the good lineups for the Timberwolves include Julius Randle without Anthony Edwards. Yeah. And so you're almost tying this anchor to your best defender in Rudy Gobert, and even Jaden McDaniels is out there for a ton of those minutes too. And then you have enough offense with Conley and Edwards to, okay, we've decided that Julius Randle is just important to this team. And I wonder if you bring him off the bench, if that exacerbates or complicates your situation there, or does it here's how I'll frame it. Does the starting lineup, does those top unit minutes improve enough to offset the damage that could potentially be done by no longer having Julius Randle inoculated by, I'll say, at least 2 or 3 of your best 5 players at all times?
I think especially on defense, it would be a problem. Like those second unit minutes, if you don't have Gobert, maybe you don't even have Edwards, you don't have McDaniels, the defense might be an issue, would be an issue. But you're still going against the other team's less threatening players, generally speaking, one. And two, I think in answer to your question, I'm optimistic. And if I'm the Wolves, I would certainly want to find out if the gains the first unit would make could offset that. Because I kind of lean towards it could, because you get something. DiVincenzo has just not been very good. I think you're probably not going to get Nick DiVincenzo again. That feels like the outlier.
Well,
you might get closer.
I was going to say, though, like Dante DiVincenzo still gets guarded like he's Nick's Dante DiVincenzo.
Yeah, right.
Too.
And what if, and that really, the focal point of all this should just be Edwards. And like, I think the 3-point volume and accuracy has been one of the most impressive individual developments of this season. I still think like if you could just open the floor for him, like, and now he's being guarded tight, like, good God, like he's going to get into the middle and it's just going to be havoc. Like, I really think you should be fixated on what can we do to make Ant more productive and just make it easier on him by letting him kind of go back to some strengths. I don't know. You got to try it, I think. And so this is all to say that's a reason the Wolves could be a lot better, is there's a good chance that this could get the offense like to a level that it hasn't been at yet.
Yeah. Man, is there a team that would trade for Julius Randle?
No.
If you're just like even looking to watch, like, could you get, probably not, could you get like Javon Carter and Lonzo Ball from,
that's fun.
Could you get Vooch and Javon Carter? Would they just take Julius Randle for that, thinking, oh, he's going to opt out, so we're getting out of money a year sooner than we would be for Vooch?
I don't know. Randle's not alone in this.
Would you just trade Julius Randle in some sort of, like, there'd have to be other money involved, but Patrick Williams, if the Bulls are really looking to get off that deal, the 5 and 90,
that's enough on the Wolves, right? They're going to be better.
I think they're going to be better, but do you think that they get there if they don't change the way that they're using? I think they've already proven they can get there.
Yeah, I think yes, and I think the gains could be like astronomical if they could get the rotation optimized.
Our next team, they're going to be better, according to you, the New York Knicks.
Can I start this with a question? Because the Knicks have been really good and they've been one of the best offenses.
You just did, so no, you may not ask another question.
One of the best offenses in the league. Are they number one? They might be number one still.
I think Boston overtook them after their disaster class against the Hawks the other night.
Yeah, they did those. Oh man, by 0.3 of a point per 100. The question is, do you think getting the defense, which currently is ranked 16th, which isn't terrible if you've got one of the 2 best offenses in the league.
Well,
is it as simple as a second big? Because the rim protection is the issue. Cat's numbers have come down from like 100% allowed inside 6 feet to the high 60s. Is it as simple as Mitchell Robinson or someone they trade for moving Cat out of the backline anchor role and onto like being essentially a wing defender again, like he was with Minnesota? You're not going to get the Wolves defense. You don't have Gobert and you don't have, you could make the case that if Mikal Bridges remembered how to guard, that you have at least as good of a perimeter defense as the Wolves did.
So I wanted to look this up because when you watch Mikal Bridges now, it just feels like screens are his kryptonite, which is a problem for someone who's in like the defense role that he is.
Yeah.
Grant, he ranks in the 4th percentile of screen navigation this year.
Isn't it like what? This is the Anthony Edwards shoots a ton of threes and makes them all now. It's like Bridges just can't guard anymore.
Do you think the power of friendship is actually complacency?
We really need to reassess, should friends be on the same team together? Do you need to hate your teammates to play defense? Is that it?
I think let's go back to Michael Jordan, which is why Nikola Jokic can't win MVP. The answer is yes.
Yeah.
There needs to be that underlying animosity.
If you don't fear your best player, where are you going as a team? Well, no, if Mitchell Robinson comes back, he's now he's again not Gobert. But is that it? Does having Cat not be your backline anchor, does that solve the Knicks defense?
Okay.
Solve is too strong a word. You know what I mean?
It might, because then the Mikal Bridges stuff isn't as damaging. So here's the problem. And I know a lot of fans have pointed to their almost league average in defense. if they go up against a top 20 offense, Grant, not top 10. If you go up against the top 10 offense, you want to know who has the worst defense in the league? The Knicks.
Okay.
If you do it top 20, so the middle 10 and the top 10, they're still in the bottom 5 of points allowed per possession. There's a talent issue here, and it's a defensive talent issue, excuse me. They have multiple weak points that teams will prod at when you look at Towns and you look at Brunson. And now Mikal Bridges has been included in that way too often, certainly more often than someone you gave up 97 first-round picks for.
Yes.
Should be. Here's where things get easier. If you put that backline stopper in, even if you're going to pick at weak points, now you have someone who doesn't need to be OG Anunoby and covering the entire floor, can help you cover it. Getting that player while preserving your top 2 offense feels impossible. And because, look, quietly, they might just have that player on the roster. It doesn't sound like he's going to be healthy before February, Mitchell Robinson. Mm-hmm. It comes at an offensive cost. And so not that I've proposed, because I still don't know what I would do it. If you just substituted in Robert Williams III for Mitchell Robinson, and he's the guy playing alongside Cat, I have 2 questions for you. One, do you think that makes the offense still top 2 material? And 2, like, who are you? I know the answer of who you're subbing out, but if Mikal Bridges is playing like this on defense, is Josh Hart still the one you sub out in that instance? And also, how much does that matter if you're not going to go to that look during crunch time? I'm not even saying they should, because part of the appeal of the Knicks and their offense is they do play when defense is feel inclined to close out on Josh Hart like that, this offense just looks unguardable.
Yeah.
And so, and even when they don't, it looks unguardable most of the time. Even when they don't look great by their talent standards, the offense looks unguardable. Putting another big into if you could get another OG Anunoby, this doesn't become a problem, but you have neither the assets, nor is there another OG Anunoby floating around out there. I've seen some people say that they think Dorian Finney-Smith could come in and then maybe you make OG your backline stopper, but OG is never, you want to call him a 5-position defender, fine. He's never been good as like a primary backline stopper. So I don't know.
And he shouldn't, that's not something you could ever.
OG Anunoby's been amazing this year. I guess you could argue, yes, it would fix some of their defensive concerns. Does it fix enough to where you're willing to withstand what I would believe, especially in the playoffs, would be the difference between a top 1 or top 2 offense and maybe like top 7?
So what I'm getting is you're not sold that this defense can be better than league average asterisk, factoring in what you said about like, it really depends on the level of offensive competition they're going against.
I really do. And the caveat there would be, as long as this is the version of Mikal Bridges you're getting on the defensive end, then I don't know what the answer is, because and maybe it is, though. I could just be wrong, because if you sub in Mitchell Robinson for Josh Hart, you could just say, well, then we're going to kill the offensive glass even more, and that's how we'll generate our offense. It'll be a little bit uglier, but do you trust? I think part of what's made Bridges be better on offense, part is what's helped Jalen Brunson's playmaking, part of certainly what I think makes OG Anunoby so dangerous is the 5 outlook.
Yeah.
And you just inherently make everybody easier to guard if you're going to the Towns and Robinson, or even like Robert Williams III can have a floater, can make more plays out of the short. So he's more dynamic, but like you put him in the corner, like teams aren't going to guard him.
Yeah, it is like this isn't a surprise, but like it is kind of a trade-off debate then, or a conversation, I guess, because like we've seen Brunson lead an offense that was real limited to pretty high highs. And if you reintroduce a second big, and we'll just use Mitchell Robinson, even though who knows health-wise and whatever, like if you introduce him into it and he at least helps the defense to some extent, and Bridges plays better, which is like, I don't know what to make of that. I haven't heard a good explanation or a good theory on like what exactly is going on there. So it's easy to say, well, when he can't be this bad, but like maybe he is. Is the gain on defense enough to offset the offense getting worse because the spacing is not as good, or Brunson has to carry a heavier load again? Like, I don't know. I think there's, if you believe in Brunson, and I think you should, you could imagine him finding ways to make the offense not lose as much as as the defense gains by adding some size and backline help. But I do think you're right that like there's really no move you make that doesn't to improve the defense or theoretically improve it that doesn't give something back on the other end. I just like, cause then who's that guy? Like that, you just can't go get that guy.
I guess, yeah, it just doesn't feel like they can get the best of both worlds. I did wonder though, like if you were able to get RW, I don't know what that deal looks like. I don't know. You could get Mitchell, you could go Mitchell Robinson for RW3, but if you're Portland, you have Klingon, like do you view Mitchell Robinson as a backup long term? Do you view him as less of a health risk than, so what do you include? Let's say you could get him. Karl-Anthony Towns taking 5 corner threes this year. If you put him in the corner when RW3 is going to be your screener, I do think that comes close to giving you the best of both worlds. And I know Karl-Anthony Towns doesn't like being in the corner. And I also feel like for bigger dudes, it might just be objectively harder to be there. But he could lift out and stuff once the play gets going downhill. Do you think that's the closest they could get, short of finding another big who spaces the floor and protects the rim, and could protect the rim?
I kind of like that as you have that option now, at least, right? Like you can play that way for some, and then you can put Cat at the 5 and he can be above the break, or he can pick and pop. Like at least, yeah, it's like, I don't know. We talk about changing lineups or adding players, and it's like, oh, they'll play this way all the time. You know, like it's not saying you do that, but it's like, no, it just, you can now use Cat in the corner as the 4 or whatever.
And you can't, to be clear, you don't get to, and I know you know this, you don't get to do that with Mitchell Robinson.
No,
because
right.
Let's assume he catches the ball on the roll. He's definitely not passing it to the corner.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think you've made me rethink it a little bit. I think a couple things I'd point to just on the improvement is coming side of it is the Knicks do actually have the most significant difference between what their point differential says their win total should be and what it actually is. They're 15-10. They should have closer to 18 wins based on that point differential.
That is saying something based off the ass kicking they took from Boston on opening night.
Right. That's priced into there. So that's not a fake number. The other thing is opponents are shooting 30, almost just under 38%. That's one of the 6th highest opponent 3-point accuracy rates in the league. We tend to say that's going to regress. Like
I do want, however, Knicks fans told us for so long that their defense was the reason the 3-point shooting was poor. And so now I don't think you get, if you went that way on that one, you don't get to go that way on this one and say, well, it's good. It's going to normalize for sure.
Yeah. We had this with the Pelicans last year, maybe the year before. I'm of the mind that like, you don't get to be in charge of how accurate opponents are from 3. It's just, you just assume regression to the league average.
You can control like the share of their shots that are like wide open for sure.
Yeah. Right. But generally speaking, so like right now, Atlanta teams are shooting 38.6%. That's the highest opponent 3-point attempt accuracy rate in the league. Like I think the right thing to do is assume that Atlanta will allow the 15th best 3-point accuracy rate to opponents the rest of the way. It's just like, I think, well, it'll actually be lower than that if you're saying they're going to eventually end up in the middle, but you know what I mean? So those are small statistical things. I think structurally though, it is a pretty interesting discussion about what the Knicks can do to get better. You've made me kind of, there's a little more nuance to that.
I think they will be better because they've been so inconsistent when you watch them from game to game that some of that I believe will normalize. And that should, even if it's only a smidgen, but at this rate, you've gotten here while being imperfect and you've dealt with, some, I'll call it a shallow rotation to be respectful. You are 4th in the East and your point differential, as you said, is they're 6th in point differential right now. Right. So like you've gotten there, or they're 5th. So like, if you move to 4th or 3rd, like that's a big deal. So I think they will get better. I don't know if it's going to be the kind of better to where, as of right now, if we went inner circle of title contenders, I have Cleveland, Boston, Oklahoma City, and like those are my inner circle. There are other teams that can win it all, and the Knicks are among them. I don't see the pathway to this team. I really do think people probably think I'm ascribing too much value to him, like an RW3 type acquisition. That's the closest I kind of see them getting to, because even if they get a reserve wing, like Dorian Finney-Smith would be nice, but I don't think he's going to change he might deepen your rotation, and that matters. Like eating up minutes matters when you look at how many minutes most of these guys are playing right now. But I would like someone that you have the option of saying, we might close this way. And I don't know if Dorian Finney-Smith, like, are you really going to play him over Mikal Bridges or Josh Hart? I don't think so.
I wouldn't think. Real quick on Bridges, like, I was going to say, like, what's your confidence? Like 1 to 10, what's your, like, just, do you have any optimism that like, he doesn't need to get back to 2nd in defensive player of the year, but like, do you think that this is just what he is now, or is there something that can change that he becomes a good defender again? Because he hasn't been a good defender.
I honestly don't know, because here's the thing. I think that, look, there are worse. I want to make it clear, there are worse defensive players in the NBA than Mikal Bridges.
Yeah.
And some of them are on the Knicks.
But relative to expectations or relative to his billing.
I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt, because I think what concerns me is we saw defensive decline almost as soon as he went to Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
And I chalked that up to, this guy just has this monster two-way workload now that he wasn't used to carrying on a day-to-day, game-to-game. But like, fourth percentile in ball screen navigation is bad, but you go back through even when he's been worse, like he's never had a season where you looked at him and said, that's someone who's below average at navigating screens. Mm-hmm. And even if you look at the data, it's obviously tough to measure this. He's never ranked lower than 77th in ball screen navigation, the percentile. So I think you can have confidence that he gets better, but I do think the level he needs to get to for the Knicks to have what I would say is a notably above average defense with this personnel, I think you can question whether he's going to get there for sure. Okay. I don't have that level of confidence. Sup, fellow sickos, Dan Valley here, interrupting this segment to talk to you about Blue Chew. No, I'm really not doing that. I'm interrupting this because when we recorded this, it was before we're about to talk about the Philadelphia 76ers. Slight spoiler alert. It was before Joel Embiid suffered a sinus fracture and before Jared McCain suffered a meniscus injury. So the stuff we say, I still think my thoughts on Embiid still stand. This wasn't a knee issue. This the Sixers are, the Pelicans and Sixers are cursed this year. I think that much is clear, but I just wanted to interject and get that up front because we did record this before there was reporting on that. I think a lot of the stuff we still say applies, but it's fair to be more skeptical on whether or not the Sixers belong here. But look, I'm right now just staring at Paul George's assist rate on drives, and I think the Sixers are going to be better for the rest of the year than we've seen thus far. But who knows? Maybe as I recorded this, one of them, tore their ACL while making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich somehow. I don't know. Cursed the Sixers are. Them and the Pelicans this year, just absolutely cursed. That's enough out of me, though. Let's get back to the discussion where, again, we're going to talk about the Sixers now, but we're not going to mention the Joel Embiid or Jared McCain injuries. I do have, this is mine, so I'm going to say it. We're going to talk about the new oh, no, we go to Philly first. Sorry, I did this out of
Oh, did the alphabet get you?
The alphabet got me. Well, we weren't. No,
it's back.
I put the Pelicans at the end because we weren't planning on talking about them at first. Okay. Grant, why is Philly going to be better?
Easy. They can't be worse. It's just, this is the one that like we can be, maybe you will be like nuanced about it and cite the numbers. It's just, if you get Maxey and Embiid and Paul George on the floor, what were they? So coming into that game against the Bulls, when prior to that game, they'd had 6 minutes together. They played 26 against the Bulls on December 8th and were plus 14. And so I just firmly believe that if you have those three guys on the floor, like at all, you're going to be good. Now the question is, how often can they make that happen with Embiid? Like Embiid's ability to be on the floor is just a massive uncertainty. And I don't know if that's going to change anytime soon, but that's really just it. Like, and then you can get into, and maybe you will, like, they can make trades. This is a team that, they didn't go all in. Like, they are not asset poor necessarily, or at least not to the extent you'd think.
I talked about this with Mort. They're just in a situation where I think you have to just go all in still, because what is the alternative? But now you've been so bad and rickety and leaky that it's, well should we? Like, right. Is this what we want to go all in with? I will say, so they've killed the minutes that Paul George and Maxey have played together so far this year, but just in minutes in general, where they've had at least two of their stars on the court. So it incorporates combinations that are just two and some three, all three of them, a minus 2.7 points per 100 possessions. Now, again, the sample size is small enough that you could write that up, but it's just something I'm monitoring. And you're probably going to need something else on this roster aside from Jared McCain contending for Rookie of the Year needs to go right. Like, I'm not just talking about Joel Embiid and Paul George's health. Is it Kelly Oubre Jr. playing better, closer to last year? Is it, what if Caleb Martin could be a league average shooter from 3-point range? That's what makes me a little uneasy, but there's no question that I don't like the idea. That's the number I saw floating around. I think it was from the ESPN story where the Sixers view it internally as, we just need to get to like 34 wins and make the play-in. I hate that line of thinking. And
Yeah.
maybe it wasn't the Sixers internally. I think it was just the data says that's
Right.
the wins they need to aim for. I still think this team is probably going to finish above 500. Is
I think
that
so too.
stupid?
No, I think so too. I wish I had a more like thoughtful take on it, but if Embiid's going to give you what is every other game just on average, like for they got 55 left or so. So you need 23 games from him and you get Paul George for more than I just think.
Can we split those? Can Paul George be injured when Joel Embiid is healthy and vice
Can
versa?
you just line up all? So like, yeah, okay, it's Tuesday. All three are going to play, and Thursday they're all going to sit. We'll just give that one away.
I'm not going to repeat the entire rant that I went on because then it's just doubling up on like the same episode. I can't also get up in arms about Joel Embiid missing time. It's a problem, but people worried about his play when he comes back. How many times have we seen this movie? He just, the ramp up, this isn't the James Wiseman ramp up lie. Like the Joel Embiid ramp up is real and it takes time. And like when he's been on the floor, like we've seen hints of it already. And that's also why I'm a believer in this team is they could make no changes. And I still think they're going to be really good. The only reason, and I feel like this skews too far into it, like we're just assuming the worst, which I think even in situations that don't warrant the benefit of the doubt doesn't make sense. If you really think this team is going to be a flop, you're telling me that you don't think Joel Embiid is ever going to be healthy and or play well for an extended period of time this year. When is that, aside from him like missing an entire season, when has that actually ever happened?
Silence.
So I did want to ask you though, because I don't want to short shrift them on this. What do you view as kind of because they're going to go to the trade market and they can combine salaries as long as they're not taking back more money in return. They're not, KJ Martin, he's one of the human trade exceptions out there. They can trade up to 4 first-round picks. I assume Jarrett McCain's untouchable, but like if you priced in him, you could get to some really like glitzy offers from Philly's end, but just not even necessarily a name. But I think a lot of people have said, and I do believe I tend to kind of agree. The 3 that I've seen is another big man type to where it's not Andre Drummond in the non-Embiid minutes, or it's someone who can maybe play alongside Embiid, or a combo forward, like just upgrading the 4 spot next to there, or just getting a bigger guard. Are the 3 that I've seen the most of.
The thing, my very first thought was a 4. And then that's assuming you don't want to use Paul George there, because if you do feel okay with Paul George as a 4, which probably is fine next to Embiid, then you need a wing, or early you need Caleb Martin to play better. Like that's just, that's part of it. This is the old, like, what adjustment should they make play better? Right. I think like, I don't know. I think it's power forward. Is it weird that I had like, what about Vucevic? Like this might be the only time I've ever thought like, well, I don't know,
the reunion.
yeah, right. Full circle, bring him back. That's one of the like most forgettable tenures in NBA history. Like, remember Vucevic was on the Sixers to start his career. I don't know. I think like this isn't going to answer your question, and you can take this where you want to, but like, if the point of this exercise is to isolate teams that are going to be better, the Sixers are 7-15 and they have a -5 per 100 differential, which is 6th worst in the league. They're going to be better than that. Like that's the low bar to clear. This is the team with the lowest bar to clear that we've covered so far.
I would agree, but do you think that they become the best actual version of themselves if they don't approach the trade market with real aggression? Like, because I guess I'm asking, like, how is it? Because I could float out a bunch of different names. Like, yeah, okay, if you traded for Cody Martin, you probably win the NBA title. But if you go get a Larry Nance Jr. versus going to get an Isaiah Stewart, like, like on the spectrum of if you want this team to be a title contender, do you think it can be this as currently constructed or with a minor-ish upgrade? Or do you think it needs to be someone who is either playing a ton of minutes or might even be a part of their playoff closing unit?
Being a title contender with Embiid's history of not making it through the playoffs kind of is like the cop-out answer is like, I don't know if you're getting there no matter what. I am inclined to think that like it almost like, oh, is it Nance or is it Stewart or somebody much better than that? Like, I kind of think like working big to small, if you just have your 3 best players that you built this whole team around healthy and on the floor, then like, unless you're talking about a massive blockbuster, all of the other additions you might make in the trade market feel marginal to me. So like the difference between Nance and whoever else you want to throw out there, like I don't know, like it's almost like a different version of the like who's the worst player they could trade for that would elevate them to title contention. I'm not sure what the answer is because I again, like we've seen these three guys play so little that I don't know if this team even really has a great sense of what its real needs would be, assuming those guys are out there. Now, again, that's like a non-answer. I still think you kind of can't go wrong with someone that can play at the other forward spot between George and Embiid. That would be a threat to defenses and help ideally, even if it was someone that could play some backup five, that'd be great. Like that's your two birds solution. The way you're framing the question, it makes me think you're kind of leaning towards you need to make a substantial like starter plus level addition to consider this team a contender.
I do, and a lot of it is to offset the uncertainty. I mean, like we focused a lot on the big three, and we mentioned Jared McKay, but as I meant, like Caleb Martin has not shot the ball well this year. Was that someone like Kelly Jr. has not been as good as he was last year, which I think you could kind of see coming when you look at the makeup of this team. And so to me, it feels like, I don't know whether it's a bigger guard. I gravitate towards the forward spot as well. You mentioned it'd be great if they could play backup five. I just feel like the list of names for like Larry Nance Jr. probably comes the closest to actualizing that event. But Isaiah Stewart, I guess, but he's not like Larry Nance Jr. is going to do more on the wing defensively, I would think, at this point. So I'm just in my head. I think they like if they're going to make a trade, I'm thinking of it as like, oh, they gave up like a first round pick and more to go make this upgrade. And I think that's what they kind of need.
Yeah, I could see that. I just, I mean, the answer might just be the uncertainty surrounding the health of Embiid specifically and George to a lesser extent means that like you almost, I don't know, you half of me says, well, you've come this far, go all the way in. And the other half is like, you can't trust that Embiid's going to be out there. So it kind of is not smart to just throw the rest of your assets after somebody else. Cause where does that get you if Embiid can't play? I don't know. It's a tough spot.
They'll be better though. Like you said,
low
bar to clear. Our next team up before we enter the lightning round portion is we have the New Orleans Pelicans. This is another low bar. I think they're going to be better because they can't get any more injured, but I do think, I guess they could, because they've been more injured than they are right now. I don't think they'll continue to get more injured. Could you make the case though, that this is a flawed inclusion? Because I think it opens up the interesting discussion of, will they really just lean into the tank at some point?
I mean, you kind of have to talk me out of that being the likely path. Because you
tank and win more than 19% of your games though.
Yeah, we really burned the this is a low bar argument on the Sixers. We should have saved it for this team. 5-20 or 5-21.
And they could be worse by the time you listen to this.
Well, so just let's look at where they are. Like you have the Ingram trade urgency is significant. I think they just gotta trade him, and you're not going to get a lot for him. And maybe he's played his last game anyway for them just because of the injury. And why would he come back if he's going to just play out the string for a team that clearly the divorce is basically all but final? Like Zion, I don't know. Like I don't think they're going to waive him. I think that's really unlikely. But like, what do you count? Like, what does getting
the way that was never a real conversation? Can you even make an argument? And I said this to Mort.
Is that a challenge?
Yeah, lawyer. Where's lawyers don't have gavels. Go get a briefcase or something and a really thick tie for some reason that maybe clips on. I don't know. My whole thing is, can you make an argument where waiving Zion Williamson makes any sense for the Pelicans?
I'll try. And as a true lawyer, I'm going to make an argument I don't actually believe in. What's the word? Okay, so the only way that you would waive him and just wipe that salary off is if you are 100% convinced that you cannot trade him for positive value or neutral value, right? Like, and I guess there is to me a scenario where look at who we haven't been able to trade for positive or neutral value, Zion excluded, like Brandon Ingram. That trade hasn't materialized.
Are we sure, or is New Orleans just I think we kind of have evidence that New Orleans doesn't really know what they're doing upstairs.
Sure. So Zach LaVine spent, I don't know, 18 months. Couldn't do it.
Right.
Couldn't trade him. Like, you had to give up picks to get off Zach LaVine's deal. So this does happen. So I guess you'd have, and now, by the way, would the Bulls have just waived Zach LaVine? Probably not. They probably would have waited it out, and now his value is high again, and they will get something for him. But if with Zion, that's a unique case, because this is every year he's hurt. Every year he seems to get less athletic. Every year it gets harder and harder to believe you can build a team around him. So you just have to get to a point where you're like, what are we waiting around for? Why are we going to keep this salary on our books if we know we're never going to be able to trade it? We're like, our best case is let's hope for a disabled player exception. We can nullify the contract that way. If some doctor says like, okay, let's just waive him now and we have flexibility. Like, look, again, I don't believe this argument, but you like, that's the way it goes, right? I guess like the counter I would say is show me the team that's going to give up like clearly positive value for Zion. And I don't think that team exists right now. That's not to say it couldn't exist in the future, but anyway,
that's why you keep him though.
Yeah, you hope at some point.
The only real reason would be they have mega free agency plans,
right?
And they don't. This is the New Orleans Pelicans.
New Orleans.
So he's not ruining your tank. I mean, look at them right now. And if you have the off chance of maybe you do get him healthy for a year and he's either so good that you're so good or he's so good his trade value is rehab. Mm-hmm. I saw that floating around out there and I was just make the case. And they're just, made as good of a case that there is, and it's still not
it's good. Not a real case. Yeah. To be clear, I don't think that's realistic at all. But so we're talking about can New Orleans be better this year? And if we
could boil it down to this,
exclude the low bar argument.
I was going to say they're on pace to win 16 games. Will they win more than 16 games? And will they be better or not?
Yeah, they got to, right? I mean, like they still have a bunch of NBA players. Like they're not like the Herb trade talk was an interesting moment earlier this week, wasn't it?
For other teams that tried to will it into existence. I mean,
that seems like where are you going to find a player as good as him on a deal? Like it's just you're never going to trade that guy. But Trey Murphy, DeJounte Murray, these are like real NBA players on the roster. I think, and if you're going to say, well, they should really got to trade McCollum and Ingram, like, I don't know, how much worse does that really make you? Like, you might have some addition by subtraction stuff there, certainly financially, but even on the court, I don't know. I think steering into the tank, though, is likely. I just don't know that actually means they'll be worse because they've been so bad.
I think if you get to a point, unless you're shutting everybody down, so let's just independent of Zion, you're just going to be better, especially with Yves Missi showing a lot. You gotten good minutes from Brandon Boston Jr. But there is is there a chance that this is the riskiest one? The Knicks feel like they might be the riskiest one, but when you look at the Pelicans, I bet you if I asked you to name how many of their leaders are in the top 5 of total minutes played on the team, I'm sure you'd get a few. I'll give you Brandon Ingram is one of them.
Hasn't Boston played more minutes than anyone else on the team this year? Did I see that right the other day?
Boston is second. Brandon Ingram is third. Javonte Green is fourth. Jeremiah Robinson Earl is fifth. And so there's a degree of here if this keeps traveling down that path. I don't look at it this is not based on anything else than anything I've seen personally. The fact that they're still 29th in rim and three frequency that PBP stats tracks is just mind-boggling incompetence from the front office. I don't care who's been injured at this point. With that being said, they're just going to have to be healthier at some point. So I'm not looking at this. Yeah, there's been some intriguing lineups. There's a lineup that's killing it for them. It's like Brandon Ingram and then nobody else who was supposed to play for the Pelicans this year. And they're like plus $1 trillion per whatever. I think you get to a point where even if you move Ingram, you know what's going to happen at that? Even if you're getting players you don't want, you might get players who are just better. Like they're more complimentary than Brandon Ingram. And so you kind of boost your product that way. But I think they're going to be better even if they wind up shutting people down or really leaning into the tank come March or something.
Yeah. I mean, 5-21. I mean, well, Washington would like a word, but like, it's hard to be worse than that.
Okay. We're entering the lightning round portion, which is, these are the teams we're not sure about. So this is the better or worse portion of the podcast. Who is first up? I don't know the order of this one. The Dallas Mavericks.
All right. So how good has Dallas been? I think a lot of people would say they're the second best team in the West, or at least in the conversation.
They are. They have the second best point differential against teams that have top 10 point differentials. They
Yeah.
are. There's been some crunch time wonkiness. We've had some weird Luka performances. We've had there was cold shooting stretches at the beginning of the season from some guys. They're in here because I didn't tell you they're going to be in here because I honestly think that they have another level to hit. And I think they're going to be better. I mean, the Derek Lively instead of Daniel Gafford in the starting lineup, I know they still kind of split the minutes. That resulting starting five is destroying people. I really do think, I don't think they're going to catch the Thunder, but for the rest of this season, I expect Dallas to be the team that winds up with the second seed in the Western Conference.
Okay. I could definitely see it. I'm just trying so PJ Washington, how many games has he missed? It feels like a lot, but maybe it's not. He's missed 5. He's like low key really important to them. So I think I was going to try to make the health argument. Maxi Kleber missed 10 games plus. That's just
you don't need Maxi Kleber when you got Maxence Prosper hitting those big shots, even though they lost that game.
I saw him out there. Who was it against? I guess it must have been in the OKC game, in the NBA Cup game. I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about him. We were kind of high on him as a draft prospect. No, I think you're right. I think Dallas has a level to climb, and a lot of that is, it sounds crazy because Luka's Luka and his numbers are insane for anybody. But like Luka hasn't been his best self at all this season, right? Like now maybe you argue that Kyrie Irving has been, and that's going to balance. As good as Luka, as much as Luka improves, Irving will regress. But I think you get Washington going. Klay Thompson is having actually like one of his worst offensive seasons since he was a rookie. Maybe he gets up over 40% from three or from the field, which would be nice. He's under 40% from the field. I don't know why, when I turned into like the let's dump on Klay Thompson, I feel like I should talk to
these guys take off a Warriors jersey and you become a monster.
Dead to me. Yeah, I could see it. I guess like the question is, since Dallas has been good, like is it capable of like splitting itself off from the Houstons and the Memphises? And I hesitate to throw like Golden State and Phoenix in there, but to get to where they're closer to OKC than they are to that like second tier, I could see it, right? Like just Luka play better. Like that's maybe all it takes.
I also think the others, and he's been a little bit better since coming back from injury, but I really think, and this kind of goes against what we're doing here, but the amount of time they have him off the ball is at an all-time high. And I just think from an energy expenditure perspective, that's going to serve them so well in the postseason.
Right. Yeah. Because if you avoid the wear down, then who knows? Like we've kind of never seen a not worn down Luka as we get deep into the playoffs. So good point there. Indiana Pacers next, Dan. This is okay. This is something I've been thinking about lately. The 21 Hawks that made the conference finals. They are the most like side-eyed, big air quotes, conference finalist in recent memory, right? The other one that I thought of is the 19 Blazers that the Warriors swept, and that team, had Damian Lillard, didn't win a playoff series after that. The Hawks, same case. The Hawks actually look pretty good right now. I'm kind of in on the Hawks at the moment, but are the Pacers now? Do they have the crown as the most like? Remember when they made the conference finals? Like, is that where they are now? Where we just look at that and think like, man, what a like lightning in a bottle. That wasn't who they are, kind of thing. Because I do feel like Atlanta and Portland both carry that. Or now that Portland's blown up, but like, I think Indiana feels like that team now. Can you talk me out of that feeling? I
mean, if you look at the number of times that Portland made during the Dame and CJ eras where they just continued to make these half measure trades or going for singles and doubles rather than going all in on the exact type of player. By the way, they needed, and the Pacers today need.
Can we talk about the similarities too? So Portland, Dame, offense only, undersized guard that has to be high usage. Atlanta, Trey, offense only, undersized guard that has to be high usage on the ball, like can't guard any positions, let alone a different one than point guard. Halliburton, not as undersized, but certainly slight. Like, I don't know.
He's 6'5". Why is that?
Yeah, well, but he can't guard anybody. He gets targeted as much as Trey.
Yeah, I'm not defending his defense.
Yeah, my undersized falls apart there. But it's like, I think we just got to stop building teams around offense only guard. Like, you need to build them differently, I think is the point you're about to make.
Right. And they're going to be worse because I don't think they've got, you talk about the need on the wing that what is this year 20 that they've had to get, and they've just decided we're good. Like we got Nemhard and TJ McConnell and Benedict Mathurin, and we're not going to play Jarris Walker nearly enough, and he's never going to be the player we need him to be. They're clearly, I don't think they're good enough to say, well, we're going to go out on the trade market and do something. I also think that they're kind of hamstrung because some of the outgoing salary for any trade, like an Obi Toppin, you might have to compensate a team to take on that deal as part of the package. I think their real flaw right now, which is why I don't trust them to be better. Halliburton, I think, is more, I don't even want to say, definitely more so than Trae Young. You can use him in different ways, and we've seen it. And we've seen them use him in way more different ways than Portland used Damian Lillard. I feel like they've just run too far afield of how did we get here? Why did we go out and get Pascal Siakam in the first place? Because Tyrese Halliburton is one of the most transcendent drivers of offensive basketball when he's on the floor. And if you wanted someone who's going to go out and screen or spend a bunch of time off the ball, you probably shouldn't have traded Buddy Hield. And I think they've tried too much to accommodate the look of even some of Andrew Nemhard's offense, but mostly a Benedict Mathurin on offense and a Pascal Siakam on offense. And look, Siakam, I think he's worth accommodating. So now you have that where I think that you've leaned too far away from what Tyrese Halliburton is great at. I'm not saying he's been good this year, but his role, just go look at the off-ball usage stuff specifically. And I think it contributes to his true usage, which factors in playmaking. It's dropped by like 10 percentage points this year, Grant.
Yeah.
I blame that on the Pacers. It's also a little bit on him. He feels too passive even on his drives relative to last year. But now you have to combine that with, well, Miles Turner is not the level of defender that he was a year and a half ago or whatever. And then on top of that, so Neesmith's been injured, one of your best wing defenders, and you really just don't have a bunch of good, properly sized wing defenders. How does this team get better? Is it because you view that their baseline isn't any, like, it's so low, it can only go up? I think it can get worse for this team. They might reach a point where it's, do we kind of reach a point where we need to consider about like throwing in the towel on this season? Because they don't owe a pick. They don't. Oh, is it this pick they owe, or is it next year's pick that they owe to Toronto?
When do the Toronto obligations start?
I think it was 2026. Yeah. So, and it's top 4 protected, so you could tank during that season as well. So they might reach a point where they're thinking in those terms. And I think you could argue the Blazers are different, but certainly with the Hawks, because like the Blazers didn't really come out of nowhere. Dame was entrenched as a star.
They were good for a while.
With the Hawks, at the time, I don't remember it being they need to go out and do this. For the Pacers, it has so long been they need to go out and do these two things. They got Siakam, which checked one of the boxes, and they have just punted on the wing aspect of it all. And I think that makes it ultra frustrating as a fan of the Pacers or just someone who wants to see teams progress. Doesn't always have to be linear, but you want progression. And so I do not think they're going to be better this year. I am officially out on the 2024-2025 Indiana Pacers.
So I get it. It's just like, it's looked so bad. I think the only reservation I have is that they've fallen so far and in ways that you would not have anticipated. Like, just it should be possible still for this team to be really good offensively. And I think it's just the sheer number of factors so Halliburton has just been worse. Like, I wonder sometimes about like, have defenses just got the book now where it's like we pressure, so Indy takes forever to get into stuff, and Halliburton's worn down, or we get it out of his hands and we dare somebody else to make plays. And then like compounded with maybe Halliburton's not healthy, compounded with the Mathurin Halliburton mix does not work. I heard Caitlin Cooper was talking about that. She was as diplomatic as could be, but basically was citing how, Mathurin just isn't wired as someone that when the ball is gotten out of Halliburton's hands, that Mathurin has it, and like the decision tree like takes form before him and he like goes down it quickly. It's just he doesn't process quickly. He's not built to be a passer on the move. He has one of the lowest assist to usage rates at his position in the league. It's like 3rd percentile. And so if he's not going to give you elite defense on either backcourt spot, and he's not going to facilitate, and it just still is not someone that loves the catch and shoot. He's not wired that way. This is all recycled shit from last year. And I'll grant you, he's made improvements in some areas. I just don't think that fit works. And so like the path to getting better is probably trading him and probably trading Jarris Walker and, seeing if you can get someone that fills the big wing need that you've talked about, or, the Miles Turner role. There seem to be ways to do it, but do you think Indy is willing to do that? Like if this is as bad off as it seems, like, are you going to trade your 2 most recent lottery picks? Like,
No.
I don't know.
And I think also the problem there is because I don't think either one of those guys, and the Jarris Walker stuff might be more on Indy than Jarris
Maybe
Walker
so.
just not panning out. Neither of those players are viewed around the league as like even close to a blue chip prospect.
Right. We
now.
don't, teams aren't calling saying, what'll it take for those guys?
And so if the best player you could get, and we had this conversation in our Discord, was like Cam Johnson or Dorian Finney-Smith with one of those guys as the anchor, and there's other salary involved. That's like kind of unspectacular. I would argue the value is probably spot on for what we've seen from these players and what they can know to be. But as a franchise, to say we're going to trade Jarris Walker to get Dorian Finney-Smith or even Cam Johnson, and you could even, we're getting off Obi Toppin in the process. Fans don't want to hear that, and they shouldn't want to hear that because you didn't have to give Obi Toppin $15 million.
That ridiculous deal. Yeah.
Yeah. And by the way, we're going to move on. We boil it down to this. You don't get the benefit of the doubt when you're an offense first team that ranks 19th in points scored per possession more than a quarter of the way through the season.
And there's no path to the defense being good, like barring total wholesale roster turnover.
Grant, we're up to the Los Angeles Lakers. Will they be better or worse for the rest of this season? Say it.
I think worse. I think worse. I think the thing we fixated on, or I did before the season, was how many games Davis and LeBron played last year, and that wasn't going to happen. They've been, other than this recent sabbatical that LeBron has taken for a couple games, they've been healthy. And Davis has been, if you just don't ever watch him play transition defense, really good. So I think those two are going to miss time. And as much as the negative on-off splits for LeBron are out there, and as much criticism as Davis has taken for being so bad or disinterested in transition on defense, it's still better if they're available for the Lakers. And I just don't think history says they're going to, well, you hear some people tell it, it's like, oh, LeBron's a negative, okay, whatever. It's just, remember when Kawhi Leonard had a negative on-off with the Spurs a few years ago? It's like, he turned out okay after that. Not health-wise, but in terms of production-wise. So if you don't think those two guys are going to be on the floor as much as they have been, you have to say they're going to be worse. The only way you say things will get better is if they do swing a massive trade. And I just think that shouldn't be the path they go down.
I feel like they have a button they haven't pressed yet. Bronny just dropped 30 points in the G League.
30. Oh boy. Yeah.
Is the torch being passed? It might be. Sorry, you can go back to your point because I think you're about to make.
Do you disagree? Do you think they'll be better or worse?
Your point about them, the only way they're going to get better is if they make trades. I'm asking this question. It's an absurd question. Is there a more cowardly front office in the NBA than the Lakers when it comes to making trades?
They traded a lot of good things for Russell Westbrook one time, Dan. So that was pretty brave.
It's like Chicago with the bad taste in their mouths from the Vooch trade. So we're just not going to make any big trades after that.
Yeah, right. Okay, we're not good at this. We're just not going to do it. I was thinking the other day, can't you view their what has it been? I mean, the Westbrook trade is the last big trade they made, right? There hasn't been anything really. Hachimura, I guess, would be one. But I kind of am starting to wonder if you can view their I don't know, judicious approach to adding big names as we can't build a team around a 40-year-old. That's insane. We can't keep trying to win now because LeBron is still in his prime. Was there foresight, maybe, if we're being charitable to the front office, to say LeBron can't be the guy, Anthony Davis maybe can't be the guy. Why are we going to go trade the picks we have now when we know we're on the precipice of the post LeBron era when we're going to need those?
I actually think that's a very cold, rational way of looking at things, which I think is the front office's job.
Yeah.
Why is Anthony Davis still on this team then? Because
that would be the coldest, most rational way to look at it is we got to trade our number one asset now.
What are you preserving your assets for then? Because you're also a Lakers team that has never okay, you haven't rebuilt through the draft in how many years?
You tried for a minute there, and then you traded it all for Anthony Davis, basically.
Which is just, I mean, you won a title. You know, I don't care that it was
Good
in the
trade.
bubble. You won a championship. You have to apologize for absolutely nothing. Everything else thereafter, I just pick a direction then. That would make them, you know what would make them better? They could lose every single game for the rest of the season if it's because that they committed to a longer term view. And I get that if LeBron doesn't want to leave and you're trying to sell tickets, why would you? I'm not saying get rid of him, but why would Anthony Davis? What is the messaging you've been sending to him? By the way, who shares an agent with LeBron? So are you all just in on like Anthony Davis is okay putting up numbers for a team that's sub mediocre? I just find that aspect of it tough to believe. I honestly do think that there's a really big disconnect between what the Lakers think they are internally and what they actually are.
Isn't there always though? Isn't that
always a disconnect? But they've refused to upgrade the roster for like the closest they've come is the addition by subtraction with the Russell Westbrook trade.
Sure. Do you think this is what this made me think back to, like when JJ Redick was doing press after he got hired, he kept referring to this as a program. Remember that? Like, I know I'm probably reading too much into it, but it's like that really felt like in hindsight and maybe in the moment to some extent, a guy that knew he was signing on for like, this isn't just like we're chasing a title now. And maybe he even said that, talking about sustainability and like putting the right processes and structures in place and all this development stuff. Like it feels clearer and clearer that maybe he came into this with eyes open as far as like what the reality is of having your best two players be on the, I mean, Davis is, I don't know, like to equate Davis.
I think you would still get a boatload for Davis if you put him on the trade block.
You'd get a ton. Yeah, for sure.
But, do you think that they were also kind of, because you and I don't know if we were joking, but we had this discussion because I remember talking to you about it. Were they also telegraphing? They went after Dan Hurley, which that was not a move that you would have made. And they went after him. That's not a move that you would think of a champ, like a team that has, I'm not even saying championship aspirations, but top 6 in the West. Yeah. And then remember the framing of they're excited about how JJ Redick can help develop Bronny, Max Christie, and 32-year-old Austin Reeves, or however old he is or whatever.
I love that. I love this theory of the Lakers now that like they never were going to like quote unquote go for it, even though you have one of the best players of all time, maybe the best player of all time, playing somewhere close to all NBA level, like, but not. And then Anthony Davis, who is an all NBA player, like, did they come into this season knowing, or maybe just going like, we'll see what it is, but if it's not great, we're not going to just, burn the house down to try to get the, 6th seed or whatever. Like, I
guess that's fair because, and they don't, and I'm selling, why wouldn't you trade? I still would trade Anthony Davis because I think you're at a point in his career where his value could decline from here. And I would argue now it's high, but you don't have your own first round pick this year. So there's not necessarily value in like we're rebuilding. So I understand that point of it, but I also don't.
I think it's a circle all the way back. Like, if you're not buying into our whole, like the Lakers actually are playing the long game and all that stuff, like the two best players are just not going to be as available as they have been. And that's just, they're going to be worse.
Or they're not going to make, even if they think that they're going to be better. I think we've seen that this front office is not going to make a big midseason move to do that.
Yeah.
Our next team, I wanted to ask this, the Oklahoma City Thunder, I gave them an A-, by the way, in report card grades. Thunder fans were livid. I just have concerns about the offense. It feels sticky at points. I think they're going to win the West. I get accused of being a Thunder homer, and I didn't give them an A+, and I'm accused of being an asshole.
You're a monster.
I love this business. It's so great. Here's my, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. You haven't had Chet Holmgren and Isaiah Hartenstein available in the same game. Is there a chance that this team is just going to be better this season from here on out? And the answer is yes.
Yeah.
Right.
I agree. Yes.
We can move on.
That's it.
There's unless you don't think he's not going to come back. I don't like what.
Even if he doesn't, you still have Hartenstein. You didn't have either of them for a long time. I think it becomes a question.
If I tell you Chet Holmgren is not going to play for the rest of the year, we can have a conversation about, will OKC continue to win at a 65 victory pace? That would be now just like they're going to be. We haven't even seen peak OKC yet, is my point.
I think that's right.
Our next team, I think this is going to be more of a real discussion. The Suns. They can't win without Kevin Durant, Mr. Hughes. Which, by the way, before you said this, you said granted you, and it kind of sounded like Grant Hughes. And I never thought, like, if you ever use the phrasing granted you, now it's like you're just saying one of the co-hosts of the most popular NBA podcast in the business name. That's really cool.
Yeah, I just like to get my name out there. That's all.
Where are you at? So the Suns, I don't know what to make of the Suns. I think we can point to weaknesses of they're too tiny. I just look at them and I say, I think Devin Booker will play better. And and he's still been like, when you look at the numbers and something, like he's still been good, but he hasn't been Devin Booker. Their level of dependence on an age 35-year-old Kevin Durant at both ends of the floor disturbs me. Is that too strong a word?
No, I mean, so they're roughly 500 team, except what is it? 9-1 with Durant or something?
11-2.
9-2, 11-2, 1-9 without him or something like that. Like
I think they're like 0-20. Actually,
complete reverse splits. I mean, so isn't it just, I mean, this is almost like an Embiid thing, but more so. Like if Durant can get healthy and stay healthy, then they'll be better. And if he can't, or if it's this, 2 weeks on, 3 weeks off thing or whatever for the rest of the season, then this is just what they are. I guess you probably got to say they'll be better, because I agree Booker should be better. I think they're probably going to trade that 2031 pick for something, right? Like they're good.
I do agree that they're the team most likely to trade a pick 2030 or later. Do you actually think they're going to move it?
What about their recent history suggests that they're precious with their draft assets?
Well, because they kept this one past the offseason.
Okay, fair point. I think they are very likely to just make more win now moves, because that's all they've done. And at this point, like, you can't even view them in like a objective or like rational sense. It's just like, you've come this far. You can't, like, now isn't the time to start like looking at the future. It just like, you just got to keep going, like dig the hole deeper, I guess is what you should do.
I think a few of the reasons they'll be better, and it might all be low hanging fruit, Kevin Durant will just be more available. I know he's had a bunch of, and I incorrectly said this. I don't know that he's never dealt with chronic injuries, and he's never really been like super injury prone. He's just dealt with stuff, and he had those two major ones back to back. Mm-hmm. So he'll probably be more available. The other thing is, I think Devin Booker will play better. Like, if we're having this conversation a month from now, I think we'll have seen a completely different version of Devin Booker. The lowest hanging fruit might be, who is the worst center you could insert on this team, and you would think that it would just change the complexion of the Suns almost entirely. Like, if you put a healthy Nick Richards in Phoenix, I'm thinking we're talking about a defense that's not 25th in points allowed per possession in the half court.
I think that's possible. I think if you just play Iguodala more, or like, I don't know.
The Dunn and the Iguodala of it all. I mean, this is old school of me, I guess, but they're rookies on a team with contender aspirations, and it's, can you ever play them enough minutes and that'll boot as depth? Sure. Yeah. There's like a primary lineup crux. It almost feels like they just need an upgraded center. And then the other thing I would say is, it feels like they need a two-way wing who's taller than Royce O'Neal. Is that the best way to frame it? I think that's the best way to frame it.
That seems fair. I think, like, if you zoom all the way out and you just look at what their incentives are, because like sometimes if you say, well, they're going to be worse, then you're pricing in like maybe they'll tank, or like maybe they'll trade veterans for young players and picks. Like, those aren't happening. So we rule those out in the calculus. And then it's just like, well, are they more likely to trade that distant first for something? Like, yeah, I think so. So I think you have to say they're going to be better, independent of Durant and the Booker arguments, which I think are also pretty compelling.
Would you trade Grayson Allen and the 2031? Actually, I should confirm that I know what Grayson Allen is making, because the Suns are a second apron team, and the player that I think it would still work. He's at 15.
Don't worry about the rules.
Right? So 15.6. So would you trade Grayson Allen and a 2031 first round pick for Robert Williams III and to get back to Monty Kamara?
Ooh. Yeah, I would. I think
you would.
Yeah, I mean,
not Portland would, because Grayson Allen actually serves a purpose there, but Monty Kamara is really fucking good. But that 2031 first, man.
In a vacuum, I wouldn't, but for the Suns and just what they seem to care about, like, if I'm the Suns, I would. Oh no, we can't, we've lost another pick. Who cares?
I would be trying to pawn off Yusuf Nurkic instead of Grayson Allen, but I don't think You're not giving up that. I mean, you might get Robert Williams back and then they'll insert salary filler, but I don't think you're getting like Nurkic in 2031. That's not enough for Kamara and Robert Williams III if you're Portland, right?
Probably not, because Kamara might be someone that you think is
And
going to
also,
be a piece going forward.
and yes, to anyone who's already commenting, we know Nurkic was traded away from Portland. We're very much aware.
It's like we know Kamara was supposed to be a Sun to begin with.
I'm going to go with better as well, though. I'm with you on that one. The Sacramento Kings.
I mean, this is a tough one. So they got to be better, right? Like they just.
I'm going to take it a step further. I think I've reached the point where I'm a bigger believer in the Sacramento Kings than Sacramento Kings fans.
Oh,
I just feel like they're right there and that you're going to get some more, I'll call it shooting progression from Kevin Huerter already looks better. I think Keegan Murray will get better. They're in a weird spot where their shot profile, they have the worst rimmer three frequency in the league, but they're only losing the 3-point battle by 9 points per 100 possessions. So 3 makes per 100. That's not great, but that's not the end of the world. And does that gap get bridged as Kevin Huerter continues to play better, as Keegan Murray plays better? I think if they just get like a combo big or maybe someone that you could play during minutes with your main players, and that opens up the floor for Keegan Murray a little bit more, where it feels like he's had to work harder for some of his shots. I think that would be the move, but I look at them and you look at their vitals too. Their defense statistically is just overachieved relative to personnel. They have no business being a league average defensive team.
No.
And I view that as a good harbinger for them. I think De'Aaron Fox has been mostly great. I think DeMar DeRozan's been as advertised. I think the same with Domas, like Sabonis, like he's not worse from last year. Certainly when did he make an all NBA team? He was in contention for an all NBA team. So I think you get into some issues with the fact that all 4 of their, I guess you could say 4 of their 5 most important players are probably Malik Monk, De'Aaron Fox, DeMar DeRozan, and Domantas Sabonis. There's some counterintuitive fit going on there in the sense of, well, how much defense are you getting out of that group? How often can you play them together? I just look at this team. They're a little top heavy right now, but I think they could make, they're among the teams that I think could make a trade. We look at it and say, oh, that's a middle rung type trade. And yet the Kings wind up being a lot better off because of it.
I think that's exactly right. And to that point, like the lineups that we thought they would use most have all worked. And now, like, I think both of us came in thinking Keon Ellis is going to start and keep it right. And he hasn't been what we thought, but the lineup with Fox, Ellis, DeRozan, Murray, Sabonis, which I thought was going to be it, hasn't been. They're almost plus 25 per 100. The 2 lineups that have played more than that are both. So I'll just give them to you. Fox, Monk, DeRozan, Murray, Sabonis plus 9.8. Fox, Huerter, DeRozan, Murray, Sabonis plus 7.2. Those are the 3 most used lineups. You've got to go down 9 lineups. Their 9 most used lineups are all positive. So this just goes to shit when you don't have basically, 5 of your 6 or 7 best players on the floor. So it is a bench issue. That's the long and short of it. So if you can make that middle rung trade and get just another live body that can help, you're getting what you thought you were going to get from all your most important players. So like, and then that's to say nothing of like Keegan Murray has got to be better. Like he's going to make shots at some point. And like you can rejigger the math game. So you're not taking the most mid-rangers in the league too. Like there's so many ways for things to trend up. I get that it feels bleak right now or like very disappointing maybe, but like you almost have to try really hard to find a statistical argument for why things will get worse, right? Like, I don't know what that argument is.
And honestly, I don't even know if they need like they probably do need to change the math of their offense. But like one of their biggest things when you watch them is because of how committed they are to limiting attempts at the rim, because they don't have good rim protectors on this team, it really impacts their closeouts on 3-point shooters. And I know we're saying you can't affect 3-point shooting that much, but like even Keegan Murray, who I said at the beginning of the season is probably the most underrated defender in basketball. And I still think the workload he has, he's fine there. His closeouts are like, they're unpleasantly anarchic sometimes, where he has to shoot such large gaps because the Kings are so committed to making sure that opponents aren't getting all the way to the basket. So if you can I'm not saying we know Sabonis is the 5. I'm not like you're trying to build your team that way. Perfectly fine. Like if you just get a better reserve big than Trey Lyles, or maybe even a better rim protector who could play next to Sabonis, which I
Mhm.
think that's probably a little bit harder to find, the latter, I would
Is
argue.
this your Robert Williams team? Maybe that's just it.
I floated that, I think, to Greg Wissinger when we were doing the look ahead pod, and he wasn't into
Mhm.
it then. Maybe he's into it now. But like and he's not a good enough rim protector, but like Larry Nance Jr. is a name I've mentioned over and over again. Just someone to like Nick Richards, like we're gonna recycle this. It might just stabilize some of the minutes there. So a change like that where it allows you to play or defend differently during some of your minutes, or more like there to be more variance in the way that your coverage on defense, I think that could be huge for them because you mentioned it. It really the bench stuff, but also just I can't get away from the numbers. Who is on this team, Grant? They have no business being 13th in points allowed per possession. They do a great job keeping opponents out of transition. Even when they're missing jumpers, they get iffy when they do actually get to the basket and they miss shots, or the short mid rangers where they're deep into the other side of the court, they're not getting back as well. But I don't know. I'm not saying they're right there to win a championship, but I think they're decidedly going to be better.
I think for sure. I was going to throw in like I still as a playoff team. I think there's just I don't think this team has a very high ceiling. Like I don't see a way the Kings get into the OKC, Dallas, Memphis, I think like Minnesota. I think I have way more faith in Golden State, like maybe even Phoenix. But like they're gonna win. I mean, they got to finish with a high 40s win total. I just think all the best lineups suggest that like that's the expectation. They just got to figure out like one or two more guys that can play 15 minutes without killing you.
I will say I'm less confident in them finishing top 6 in the West than I am Denver.
Oh yeah, I forgot to say Denver. I would put Denver way ahead of them in terms of like playoff equity.
The Spurs, better or worse, and why is it better?
That's an interesting one. Because would you say they've exceeded expectations, right? Like, or I mean, it depends because there was such a wide range of it was all just like, well, how good could Wemby be? I think like I don't know. Do we have all the Steph Castle stock? Can we get some more? I think like what if he just starts making? He's been better as a starter as offensively. Like maybe it's always weird with rookies because it's like, are they going to get that much better over the course of the season? I'm just teeing it up for you because it's like who's going to come into this rotation that's going to make a huge positive difference? I can't think of anybody.
What if he's already there, Grant, in Devin Vassell? He's only played 9 games. He's averaging under 25 minutes a game. He's hitting 42.3% of his 6 3-point attempts per game. And by the way, this does not impact Devin Vassell at the moment because he's not a starter, but San Antonio's starting lineup is destroying opponents right now. They're a plus 18.1 points per 100 possessions. Do you assume but that's just it's a side question, but do you think Devin Vassell is going to stay off the bench, like on the bench the entire season?
Well, that's such a weird thing because it seems like he's what you need in this lineup, right? Like, and for a minute there, Vassell was like the prospect on this team. Like, he was the best guy. The guy you had the most hope of hitting an all-star ceiling.
I still think I love Steph Castle, but I still have him as like the guy below Wemby for me. But maybe they're thinking that he's not that guy. So I think. Look, they've been better on offense the past month. They're 12th in points scored per possession. I do think their path to being better, Devin Vassell is going to come in here, and I think that'll be a larger infusion over time. I don't have confidence they're going to make some mind-melting trade to do something, but they could just make a small trade. It doesn't have to be a blockbuster that just improves the depth of their rotation and their two-way balance.
Sorry, do you know how many lineups have played more minutes than the starters for the Spurs that have a higher net rating in the entire league? So 309 possessions for that for Paul, Castle, Champagny, Barnes, and Wemby.
And how many have played? I'm going to say 1 because I'm going to assume it's the Knicks starters.
It's 1 and it's Boston starters. So pretty good, Spurs. Pretty good. So yeah, what does that look like if you have Vassell in there, or it's just like Champagne's been good. Actually, both
really good.
It's a good Champagny season right now. If you have Devin Vassell in there playing more, are they going to be better? They're 500 right now. I think they might be.
I'm going to go optimistic and say better.
Yeah, I think I go better too. That lineup is so good. Like it's the kind of the Kings argument. Just get like 1 or 2 guys that can help, and you're set.
The Toronto Raptors, Mr. Hughes. We're throwing this one in as just sort of a ceremonial.
Yeah. So I had this case made for them before Scotty Barnes got hurt that maybe some of it still applies, but it was really built on like Kelly Olynyk had just come back when I started thinking about this, and quickly, I can't remember how far off he is with the elbow, but like Kelly Olynyk shot almost 39% from three last year. Quickly was just under 40% last year. And I was thinking about just introducing two shooters like that. Now Quickly is going to be on the ball some or a lot more
Now he's
with
going to have to
Scotty
be.
Barnes out. Yeah. But the theory of, okay, you've got two shooters that defenses really care about, and you've got like just this glut of facilitating players that aren't point guards like Barrett, and you've got Grady Dick can do stuff with the ball, and then Scotty Barnes before he got hurt and is set to miss a bunch of time with the ankle. So the theory was going to be just like you have all these guys that are elite at their position in assist percentage, and you're going to add two shooters to that group that hopefully will stay healthy. So this team that averages the fifth most potential assists in the league, when I put these numbers together, like they're just going to make more of those. Like the shots are being created like in large quantities. They'll just make more. They were 23rd in 3-point accuracy just before Barnes got hurt. So my thinking was the offense has like a ton of upside just because you add shooting to facilitation, and there you go. I don't know how I feel about it without Barnes. I think like now you're really down your main playmaking guy, but there's some argument the offense could be at least as good, but better is harder to get behind now that you've lost your best player.
I think you have to go worse because of the Barnes stuff. And then also they're going to then reach a point where the lineups are going to get weird.
Yes.
The rest of the season. I guess you could say that, well, they're bad enough right now to where if the season had ended today, they're still looking at top 4 lottery odds, but there's going to be other teams that are tanking their hearts out at some point, and you're going to have to keep pace with them. So that's why but also just you look at their win total right now. They could theoretically just win more than 27% of their games the rest of the way.
I mean, they're still going to be kind of fun even without Barnes. Like they're the most fun bad team in the league right now.
I think that's the take. One of the takes we've had this season that have aged the best is we recorded that segment on the Toronto Raptors are the perfect kind of bad.
Yeah.
And it still just rings true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's what a bummer about Barnes. Like, I mean, yeah, the steering into the skid argument is like, even if you think, oh, they'll be about the same, like the incentives are what they are for this team. So I think I got to go worse with you.
That does it. We went through 14 teams, Hughes, and our lightning round was not true to form, not very lightning-y. Is that a word? So, are you ready to take us out of here?
Yeah, sorry to end on a down note with the Raptors, but we did call them fun. So, even if they're not going to win more games,
hashtag analysis.
They'll be exciting. Thanks everybody for watching, for listening. If you have not already, do all the usuals: rate, review, subscribe, follow us on all your socials. Make sure that you're commenting on the YouTube videos. Let us know if you agree with anything we said on the better or worse side of things. If we forgot a team that is has massive upside that we did not give credit to, let us know that as well. Tell your friends about the podcast. Tell your enemies about the podcast. Join our Discord. Links for that in the YouTube and podcast description. I think that's going to cover it. As always, shouts to Frank Ntilikina. Apologies, Jared Allen.